state that Judge Neal's next witness, who is Judge Dina Fine, Massachusetts Housing Court.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Chair Devaney, Councilor Albano, my councilor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to offer testimony in support of the nomination of Justice Ralph Gantz as the next Chief Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court. It's been my privilege to appear before this body on a number of occasions over the years, but I've actually never been more enthusiastic about a nominee than I am today, perhaps even including my own hearing in 1999. I'm honored to be in the company of Chief Justice Ireland and the other distinguished individuals from whom you've heard and from whom you will hear, and I will therefore keep my prepared remarks brief and will happily answer any questions that you have for me. I've been a housing court judge for 15 years. In addition, 5 years ago, I was appointed as special advisor to the trial court for access to justice initiatives at roughly the same time that Justice Gantz was named chair of the Access to Justice Commission. So that's how we know each other. We've worked very closely together ever since. As a member of the Housing Court, as a judge from Western Massachusetts, and as someone who cares deeply that our court system provides meaningful access to justice for the public in all of its diversity, I feel strongly that Ralph Gantz is precisely the right person to serve as Chief Justice of the SJC at this moment in history. So if you were to look at the organizational chart of the Massachusetts court system, you'd see quite a bit of distance between the Chief Justice of the SJC way up here and a Western Mass housing court judge way down over here somewhere. Like Chief Justice Ireland, whom he's been nominated to succeed, however, there's simply no sense that Justice Gantz sees himself as above those of us who work in the trenches. To the contrary, in terms of the work that we do in the housing court, Justice Gantz understands that in the middle of January, having heat restored to the three-decker in North Adams is just as important to the people who live there as anything else that the court system does. Justice Gantz understands that our court system is responsible for a range of cases that affect a range of people. He genuinely respects the people involved in those cases and those of us in the court system. There's a sense that will perhaps resonate with those of you who represent districts outside of Boston, that sometimes statewide decision-making happens here in the seat of government without sufficient regard for other areas of the Commonwealth. In Justice Gantz, I know that we would have someone who would see himself as Chief Justice of the entire statewide court system, who would make it a point to travel around the state to all of your districts, who understands the critical importance of connecting our courts to the communities that they serve, and who would help all of us around the state make that possible. Finally, and as you've heard from other witnesses already today, the last decades have seen a huge increase in the number of litigants who appear in some of our court departments, notably the probate and family court and the housing court, without lawyers. Justice Gantz knows well that this trend is challenging at many levels and requires a careful re-examination of the way we go about our work as a court system. Justice Gantz understands that dealing sensibly with historically underserved populations such as self-represented litigants, those with limited English proficiency, and those with physical or mental disabilities is essential to the efficient operation of the court system. He also knows that ensuring access to justice for everyone in society is fundamental to our principles and our values as a constitutional democracy. Put differently, Justice Gantz knows that the rule of law doesn't exist for anyone unless it exists for everyone. His absolutely tireless work in this area reflects a deep commitment which inspires those of us who work with him. With Ralph Gantz as our Chief Justice, you would truly be able to reassure would find in him a person who leads by example, is true to his values, and makes it possible for all of us to do our best work in serving the public. I urge your speedy confirmation of Ralph Gantz as our next Chief Justice. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. Very much. Any
Thank
councilors? Councilor.
Thank you, Chair. Jeff Ryan, good afternoon, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Nice to have two people from Western Massachusetts, Judge Ireland, Brian Springfield, and
Her name is son,
his son.
our adopted son.
And I want to thank you publicly for the courtesy and hospitality you extended to me in my recent visit to the housing court. So it was very nice of you, and it was a real eye-opener for me. But it gets to this whole issue about access to justice, and I asked the previous witness her view of where we would be at the end of the day after Chief Justice Gant's tenure is completed. From a judicial perspective, in your court, what does it mean? And what differences will the average person see? And I say that because when I was in your court, it was a day of evictions, and one of the defendants and petitioners was there unrepresented by counsel. And I'm watching this whole thing unfold, and I'm saying, my God, what could be worse than losing your home? I suppose your liberty would be worse, but losing your home, pretty dramatic event. So, at the end of 12 years of Chief Justice Gantz, what are we going to see different relative to the access to justice?
One of the many reasons I admire Justice Gantz, and certainly one of the reasons that I'm here publicly to support him, is that I genuinely believe that under his leadership there will be a difference, a concrete, tangible, demonstrable difference. And I should explain for those of you who are not familiar with my court department that we do everything having to do with residential housing in the housing court, a whole host of cases. Some people don't realize we do class actions, we do jury trials, we do civil cases, we do a lot of landlord-tenant disputes. 95% roughly of the tenants who are here in my court, in our court, not just my division but statewide, are unrepresented. They do not have a 95% of tenants and a huge percentage of landlords. So it's this is not a theoretical or conceptual interest. This is very real. And what I expect we will have in the court system under Justice Gantz's leadership in the coming years is more of what we heard a little bit about this morning. We are, and by we I mean the trial court, is piloting 2 court service centers in this month, actually. One is already opened in Greenfield, and the next is opening at the Brook Center at the Brook Courthouse on June 2nd. Those are centers that are going to be open to the public to provide information about the courts, assistance completing forms, referrals to legal assistance and social service agencies that will really help the public in general and self-represented litigants in particular access and navigate the court system. And so we're piloting those 2. I am very confident that under Justice Gantz's leadership, those will, as is anticipated, be supported and rolled out across the entire Commonwealth so that when people walk into any of the big courthouses around the state, they have a place to go. And importantly, not only do they have a place to go to get the information and the assistance that they need, but one of the important benefits of having those centers is that the people who are working in clerk and registry offices, probation offices, etc., who normally have to feel a lot of inquiry from uninformed members of the public and process confused papers and all of that, they will be benefited by the fact that we will have a particular resource designed to help the public and, as I say, so one concrete benefit that I see and something tangible that we'll be able to point to. We've started to do a lot around language access in the trial court. We just completed a project where now all of the small claims forms have been translated into 7 different languages. So you can actually print out a small claims complaint in Khmer or Russian. It's really quite amazing, as I was saying earlier to Councilor Duff, to see a pleading come out of your printer in Khmer. And we've done a series of orientation videos around small claims that are now available on the Trapcore website, a new website, I should say. And those have also been dubbed into all of those languages. I expect that we'll see much more of that under Justice Gance's leadership. I expect that we'll see more lawyers doing pro bono work and limited assistance representation, because under his leadership, that will become increasingly a part of what people see as as a part of their professional identity. I expect that his work with law schools will engender the sense that this is a part of one's professional responsibility. This perhaps speaks to Councilor Kennedy's comments earlier. And I expect that what we'll see is more and more members of the profession seeing it as not just their responsibility, but as in their self-interest to do this sort of work. And so we'll benefit from that in the trial court, as will, of course, the people who would otherwise be unrepresented. It's not to go on, but am I hitting on some of the
You
points?
did, it's very, very compelling. And I want to tell my colleagues, Judge Fines, rising stars of the judiciary in Massachusetts, and look forward to seeing good things from her in the years to come. I also say she was one tough judge. The city of Springfield had a number of housing cases before Judge Fines, and at one point, she held the city of Springfield in contempt, and me being the mayor, she held me in contempt at the same time, probably for good cause, but I think
Apparently,
we resolved the issue. This was after I went to your swearing-in ceremony. So,
not very grateful of you.
she gets the job done. She's a fine vet. So, thank you very much for your testimony, Your Honor.
Any other council?
Thank you for talking about the program that you spoke about later. Just by coincidence, I do happen to represent a very large population of community residents, and the immigrants to this country, I consider them a heroic people for what they've been through, and they've come here legally, and they're working very, very hard to be, part of the American dream. And just by pure coincidence, I got a call on Friday from one of the leaders in that community asking me how things were going here today. So your work is noticed and is appreciated very much, and it really does mean so much that it is justice for all. And I, again, thank you for your work. And I think in the housing courts, too, I mean, it's just a tremendous thing for people to know that they're going to be heard. And it's very, very hard work to sit in the housing court. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Any other council?
Judge, what did you give Councilor Van for sitting down?
I honestly don't remember. I'm sure we came quickly into compliance.
Wasn't long enough. Judge, let me ask you, Judge Gantz is going to sit on our court for quite a while, he's confirmed. Could you speak to his ability to be an administrator? That's required, I see, the chief of higher courts.
Yeah. So Justice Gantz is like a pack mule in terms of the work that you can load on him. I just really heard some of that earlier, and I noticed that other witnesses testified to the fact that they get emails, and then my husband has developed a look on his face that I recognize as that he knows it's Justice Gantz on the phone look, and it means that he's going to have to go on the bike ride by himself on Sunday. So my point is that he's a tireless worker, and there's a lot to the need to be that for your administrator. Administration is not easy, and it's not something that you can delegate, and you have to be prepared to dig in and do pick and shovel work, and Justice Gantz is and does. So I'll say that. I also serve under Justice Gantz on the Access to Justice Commission because of this position that I have with the trial court. I'm ex officio on the commission. I was a member of the original commission under the leadership of retired Chief Justice Wilkins, and then I now serve under Justice Gantz. And so I've seen him organize and move complicated pieces of work and manage complicated dynamics among groups of people. He's extremely effective at it, and one of the ways in which he's effective at it is that he knows what to delegate and how to delegate. He knows when and what not to delegate. So that suggests to me that he is and will continue to be a very effective administrator. And the last thing I'll say is to sort of circle back to the fact that I think it's important in an administrator to demonstrate that you have the ability to do the work you're asking others to do and that you're prepared to do it. And he passes that test with flying colors.
Part of the duties is to come across the street and deal with people in the State House to advocate for more funds for the court system. It's down to 1% of the court system now, so we want to get up there and
Let's double it. Let's double it.
Oh, we got to go on.
Okay.
How do you think Judge Gans is going to be able to fare across the street with the political party?
Yeah, very well, and I say that based on a couple of things. First of all, Justice Gans and I have worked together on programs for legislators and legislative staff members to assist in their orientation about the court system. We both share the thought that the people in this building really do want to understand what the courts do, and that the more we can explain it to them in terms that are meaningful for them and that resonate in terms of the work that they have to do and the people whom they have to represent, the better our relationship would be. And so I've seen Justice Gans work with people in the legislature in those contexts, and he's extremely effective. The other thing I know about Justice Gans is that he will recognize in legislators their good faith interest in understanding our work and in contributing meaningfully to this joint enterprise that we're in, this joint effort that we're in, which is about governing and public service. And so I know that he will find substantive ways to engage with members of the legislature. And my experience with legislators is that they are interested in doing that. They want to be, they want to engage on substance, not just the politics. And I'm sure he'll do an excellent job at that as well.
Some of the other duties he may have are disciplining judges and lawyers also. You think he's going to have the wherewithal to do that, not only the judge does something?
Well, I'm sure he will. There's a look that comes over Justice Gans when he's concentrating really hard, and I really think that's all anyone's going to need to see on his face. And there will be a lot of snapping too when they see it, because he has, he's very clear thinking, he has enormous powers of concentration, and he's very intellectually honest. And most of us that I work with in the presence of that really are motivated to do our best.
Does your court cover the city of Oil?
Yes, it does.
Make sure you take care of the people in Oil. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Make sure you take care of the people who come before you from the city of Oil.
We try very hard.
Any other councilors have any questions? Well, thank you, Peter. Mr. Maloney, in charge of the rules a lot. Thank you so much for
Thank you. It's my honor.
The next witness is Gavin Fishman, Farming Lumber. That's your title, Farming Lumber.
Hello, Chair, Councilors. It is truly an honor to speak before you today. My name is Alexander Gavin Fishman, and I'm thrilled to speak on behalf of my former supervisor, Justice Gans, in his candidacy for Chief Justice. During the 2012 to 2013 court year, I had the honor, the privilege, and the absolute pleasure of serving as law clerk to Justice Gans. Over the course of that year, I grew to know Justice Gans as a jurist, a mentor, and most importantly, a friend. As anyone who has read his opinions or argued before him knows, Justice Gans is staggeringly brilliant. His analytical ability is nothing short of breathtaking. In a shockingly short amount of time, he can wrap his mind around the most complicated legal conundrum, factual puzzle, or contested point of policy, and develop a response that is not only coherent, but often more fair and efficient than any of the arguments previously put forth. But the Chief Justice has to do more than write opinions. And in these additional roles, I truly believe that Justice Gantz will excel. First, among the most surprising things that I discovered as soon as I began my clerkship were Justice Gantz's humility and approachability. As a recent graduate of law school, I assumed a justice of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court would be an imposing figure who always made those around him feel the weight of his authority. While Justice Gantz absolutely assumes the mantle of an authoritative figure when the need arises, I discovered very early in my clerkship that far more commonly, he is a friendly, considerate, and tremendously enjoyable person. His jokes, as you've heard many times today, are hilarious, and he speaks to those around him not as subordinates, but as respected colleagues and friends. As an example of this, while each of the other justices of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court hosts a brown bag lunch for the law clerks of the SJC's at the SJC's dining room, at some point during the year, Justice Gantz typically invites the entire class of law clerks to his home for a summer barbecue that he personally cooks up for everyone, and it's delicious. If you speak to anyone who has worked for Justice Gantz in the past, or to anyone who has gotten to know him on a personal level, the most common trait which will arise in such conversations is his kindness. Justice Gantz goes out of his way to care for those around him, and to develop positive relationships with everyone, from fellow judges, to legislators, to members of various bar and community organizations, to court support staff, really everyone. As a Chief Justice, I will actually pause for an example on that point, in terms of his consideration for others. One time, Justice Gantz and I were up until past midnight working on an unpublished single justice opinion. And that night, without me asking and me trying to turn him down several times, Justice Gantz insisted on driving me all the way to my home, which was in completely the opposite direction of his own home. As Chief Justice, I am certain these traits will benefit the SJC and the Massachusetts judiciary as a whole, because Justice Gantz's exceptional ability to develop positive relationships with everyone around him, while still maintaining the authority and integrity of his office, would allow him to build bridges with those in the executive and legislative branches, as well as those in the community at large. Second, Justice Gantz has a phenomenal ability to discuss disagreements respectfully and openly, to truly listen to others in such situations, and to work with those with whom he may initially disagree to reach a fair, reasoned, and optimal outcome. When I interviewed with Justice Gantz, the first question I asked him was, if I disagree with you, what should I do? I will never forget his response. He smiled at me and told me that if I were his law clerk, he would consider it my first and foremost job responsibility to speak my mind and let him know if I thought he was getting something wrong. Justice Gantz has lived up to that answer ever since that day. During my year as his law clerk, we would often argue issues together. I would tell him why I disagreed with a certain line of analysis, and then we'd engage in an honest and completely respectful conversation about the issue. He is always open to hearing thoughts and talking things through. And I know there are many situations in which the Chief Justice of the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court has to engage in conversation with those with whom he may initially disagree. I can tell you this with perfect confidence. Justice Gantz will absolutely excel at this, as he is able to clearly and respectfully articulate his positions while engaging in conversation that makes any supposed adversary feel heard, and while sincerely trying, if possible, to arrive at an outcome that is satisfactory to all. Overall, I believe truly that Justice Gantz is the best supervisor that I have ever had, one of the most incredible lawyers I have ever met, and without exaggeration, one of the most amazing human beings with whom I have ever had the pleasure to interact. I am willing to bet that I will never work with another supervisor who I will admire and respect as much as I admire and respect Justice Gantz. As a judge, his analytical ability and commitment to fairness are remarkable. As a supervisor, he is considerate and respectful of everyone around him. As a negotiator, he is persuasive when he needs to be and open-minded where there is room for collaboration. As a mentor, he has provided me with a role model to which I will always aspire. As a supporter of diversity and justice, he is passionate and dedicated. I can think of no one I would rather see step into Chief Justice Ireland's shoes in leading the judicial branch of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and if he is offered the position, I wholeheartedly believe that Justice Gantz will be an incredible Chief Justice.
Thank you for your testimony. I have to say, before I call my colleagues, I was watching you as the witnesses were talking, you never stopped nodding.
I have agreed with pretty much everything that's been said so far.
That's
Did you ever change his mind?
Yes.
How many times?
Probably a handful.
So you're the one that is responsible for making the decision.
I hardly say that. And then actually, I'm glad you bring that up. One of the things that I truly think distinguishes Justice Gantz is every word of his opinions is his own. He often asks his law clerks to draft a first draft of the opinion, but he doesn't just edit our first draft, he rewrites it. He writes every opinion himself. So I may change his mind, but the words are his.
Okay. I agree with you, he's brilliant.
Good.
Smart, brilliant, all that. I want to know, at those times when under pressure, pressed for time, whatever, what's his temperament?
It actually doesn't change that much. That's the impressive thing. Even when we are pressed for time, when we were, as I said, up till midnight writing a unpublished opinion, he is, as you've heard, he continues to be reasoned, he continues to maintain his composure, he continues to make jokes. It doesn't change. He handles pressure extremely well.
Did you ever see him lose his temper?
Yes,
What happened there?
only once. He was
Was it with you?
No, it was not at me. He was extremely frustrated by something that he thought was going on in a committee that he found deeply unfair. And he vented to me for a little while, and then we sat down and planned out how we would respond.
When that attack.
I don't think it was an attack. It was actually sort of planning a way, as I said, it's about persuasion. We planned a way to convince people that what they were doing was truly unfair to potential litigants.
And are you still working up at the SJC?
I'm not. It was a year-long clerkship. That's how long most clerks last. I'm currently an associate at Ropes and Gray.
So you were big time.
I don't know about that.
Good testimony, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other councilors? Thank you. Your testimony was amazing. Well organized. Really, I think it was wonderful. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It was truly an honor.
We'll see you back.
Attorney Gantz, sir.
Chairperson Devaney and members of the council. My name is Max Stern. I have been a practicing attorney in this Commonwealth for 43 years. I have appeared before the full bench of the Supreme Judicial Court more than 30 times. I am the immediate past president of the Massachusetts Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. And I am here to urge you to confirm Judge Ralph Gantz as Chief Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court. I first came to know the candidate more than 20 years ago when he was a federal prosecutor and I was representing a client under investigation. This, I can tell you, is a very frightening experience for an individual, no matter how innocent, because federal prosecutors have massive power to bend people to their will. But I found Ralph Gantz to be a sensible and impartial investigator, interested in a just result rather than a notch for his belt. In today's world, all too often, the only issue for such a prosecutor is whether the immense power of the federal government can be used to build a case. But with Ralph Gantz, it was only, how do I get right? Later, I appeared before him when he was on the Superior Court. In my experience, there are very few judges, especially on the criminal side, who prosecutors and defense lawyers alike are pleased to see assigned to their case. Judge Gantz was one of that handful. Not ideologically aligned with either side. If what you wanted was an open-minded, intelligent, attentive, considerate, patient, and very hard-working judge, this was your man. So too on the SJC. Judge Gantz has proven to be a leader on an extraordinarily high-powered bench. His decisions are models of clarity, thoughtfulness, and knowledge of the law, and will stand the test of time. More than that, he has not confined his efforts to deciding individual cases, but has devoted himself to the larger cause of improving the quality of justice in Massachusetts, both civil and criminal. Others have already told you about his remarkable work on access to justice. As president of the Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, I interacted with him on issues of criminal rules and procedure. Most importantly, he spearheaded an effort, now pending before the full court, to deal with the intractable problem of mistaken eyewitness identification, the greatest source of wrongful conviction, as he put it in an opinion for the court. Here is a man who is determined to leave our system of justice in better shape than it was when he came in, and who has both the ability and the will to make a major contribution to that effort. Elevating him to be the head of our court system will be an enduring benefit to the citizens of this Commonwealth, as well, nationally, to the other courts which look to ours for guidance. He is a superb appointment, and I hope that you confirm it.
Thank you very much, Chair Stern. Any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Secretary. Thank you for your testimony today. I'm delighted to have you here and follow your career with a great deal of interest over the years. As you started out speaking, the first encounter with Justice Gaines was when he was a assistant U.S. attorney. Some of us that caused us some concern, as well as his tenure with the FBI. So your testimony is important. I'd like to have you elaborate a little bit on that, because it is difficult for one to see how one goes from that experience, being a champion of justice for civil rights in Massachusetts. I'm interested because the comment here and the experiences are so interesting to me, and how does one get past that to get to where some of us want to be relative to principles and values on the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts.
Well, I think it depends on exactly what, it has to do with what his approach to the job was then. And I don't think his approach to the job was to get an indictment or to get a conviction at all costs, or to do whatever could possibly be done given the enormous resources and power of the federal government. I think he was generally, he exercised the power that he had with great judgment and wisdom and impartiality. And I think somebody who has that approach to that fantastically important and powerful job is somebody who is able to continue to look for justice when he leaves that job or those jobs and goes into others, as he did. And then he was on the other side of the fence as well. He was a private lawyer. And I think, that's part of the reason why his very well-deserved reputation on the Superior Court was everybody liked him on both sides, because he had been himself on both sides. He understood what it was to be a practicing lawyer, and he understood from having represented clients what it was to be on the receiving end.
Appreciate that. I have to agree with you. It's kind of a unique background. You would not have gone to work for the U.S. Attorney in Massachusetts, I don't think. You would not have gone to work for the FBI, I don't think. Especially in the chapter that we all know is pretty ugly here in Massachusetts. So I'm trying to think of a time someone might go from one extreme to another, and who's going to be able to project those values and those principles as Chief Justice.
Well, they're not all that. And there are
The system is that.
The system has certain aspects to it, especially today, which were not as true when Ralph Gance was there, in which the prosecutor had so much power, it was very difficult to resist using it.
Well, you and I had a nice conversation, and Marty Silverglade called, and Justice Gertner brought the message, and he's very interested in supporting Justice Venus. You wouldn't be here for Scalia. Scalia was going up there.
If Scalia was resigning from the U.S. Supreme Court, I would definitely. My point being, philosophy of justice. No, I agree with you.
I remember when everyone wants to talk about litmus tests, but I don't understand it. They think elections are all about, Obama put cake and Sotomayor and the bench had to do a litmus test, whether people want to admit it or not. So I'm interested really in terms of philosophy, legal philosophy, where we're going to be at the end of this tenure as the Chief Justice.
Well, I think you can look at the opinions that he's written as far as I hope this doesn't establish me as biased, but I've actually won a couple in the SJCs in New York, so I'm quite satisfied with those. But they're not all one way. There are decisions that he's made that have not necessarily made defense attorneys particularly happy. I think it really is true that he approaches these things with a very open mind. He has a great ability to consume a lot of law, really, and sort of get his arms around a very complicated area and try to sort it all out. And he presides it the way he really does see it. And everybody appreciates. Everybody knows that if you have a good case, you have a good shot with Ralph Gaines.
And I understand and appreciate that, but everybody has reasons, philosophical meaning. That's why we have a Supreme Court that's 5-4 right now, and most of the issues are tilted to the modern, to the right. So I'm interested in philosophy. I don't know how you can sit here and say that philosophy doesn't make a difference. That's what the elections are all about. That's what appointments are all about. That's what nominations are all about. In the end, whether people want to admit it or not, there is a general philosophy here to get to. I appreciate you saying that he examines the cases and is fair-minded and all that.
Well, I think it's principle. I remember being there when. Okay.
You remember this whole case?
Yeah, I do.
I haven't seen what it did.
Exactly.
NSA.
I was.
Which I'm going to ask Gaines about when we get the question in.
I remember being there when Justice Gaines was sworn in as an associate justice. And I remember the speech he gave, which is that he thinks that his principal job is to uphold the Constitution and uphold the constitutional rights of people. But that's really more important than anything else. And I think that he's followed through on that belief. And that's all the philosophy I need.
Well, I appreciate that. You will agree with me that there are differences in interpretation of the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
Affirmative action, death penalty, Roe v. Wade, all that. Differences.
Certainly.
So, it becomes a critical decision for us, because once he assumes that position, there's no going back. It's kind of what was pointed out endlessly today. There's no review of this. So it's important to get it right. And if it was a different governor making the nomination, like a governor around there, I disagree with him on his politics and his philosophy, but that's what elections are all about, and he's got a right to do that. So it's important for us to get this one right, because it's going to be there for the next 11 or 12 years. You're talking, given this history with the U.S. Attorney and everything else.
I am very comfortable, despite everything I know, and because of everything I know about him.
Well, I trust your judgment, given the work that you've done over the years. I trust your judgment. And you're compelling witnesses today, what you said in your experience. So I thank you very much. Thank you.
our court in Massachusetts. And I think more so with what went on in the 80s and 90s, just included in the trial a year ago down at that building. So people are skeptical, citizens are skeptical of the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and people that work down there. And the fear is they become indoctrinated after a while, and they leave that area and they end up here looking for a judge. And we have been, since at least I've been on the council, we have taken great pains to be cautious of people that came out of that building and are looking for a judge here. Well, what do we tell people that send us here? They say, hey, he was down in the federal system. He's going to leave our court now. And they say, I'm sure concerned about that. What do we tell them is that?
Well, first of all, it's not the only thing he's done. It's not as though he spent, his entire legal career down at the seaport, with the odds stacked in his favor. But he was not just a Fed, but he was a private lawyer as well. And he spent so many years on the Superior Court proving that he really does believe in the constitutional rights of litigants, of defendants, and also in the Supreme Judicial Court. And I think he has a track record that really, that really proves that. So I would have no worries with that.
Well, I mean, you have worked down in the federal court over the years, and I've had the case with Judge King. You know the feeling when you walk into the building, the feeling you get sitting there on that basis. And again, that is the Judge King. What was his reputation down there when he was in the
I don't, frankly, I don't remember anything in particular about his reputation at that time. What I do remember was my experience with him, which was very good. It was the kind of investigation that today could have another result, simply because of the ability of federal prosecutors to use the threat of very lengthy sentences to, essentially bludgeon people into testifying according to the way they, already think is the facts. And that was not the way Ralph Gantz went about it. He went about, first of all, finding out the facts in a very impartial way, not trying to slant it in any way. And then secondly, exercising real wisdom and judgment in deciding what to do once he had those facts. Now, that's not to say there's nobody there today that wouldn't do the same thing, but that's the way he was.
Well, I would probably put that description on the minority class. Let me ask you about access to justice and how that pertains to the criminal side of our court.
I think that I know that Justice Gantz realizes, and I know that the SJC has appreciated for many years, that the right to counsel on the criminal side is the most fundamental right of all. All of the other rights of the criminal defendant depend almost entirely on the right to counsel. If you don't have competent counsel, you essentially have no rights. And I certainly know anybody on the SJC realizes this, especially because they have to review transcript after transcript and read the record of cases where lawyers have not been competent and where the result might well have been different had they had experienced counsel. Justice Gantz, I know on several occasions, both as a Superior Court Justice and as an SJC Justice, has found that assistance given to a defendant not only by reviewing cases, but also because the justices of the SJC appoint the majority of the members of the Committee for Public Counsel Services, which is in charge of public defense in this Commonwealth. And public defense services are under enormous pressure everywhere, but especially in this Commonwealth where our budgets are, very much, under pressure themselves. Recently, a committee or commission of the Mass Bar Association reviewed the salaries of the public defender and board attorneys, the Bar Advocate Council, their rates, as well as prosecutors and assistant attorney general, and found that their compensation was woefully inadequate, really of crisis proportions. The SJC will have to continue this role in safeguarding and protecting the rights of counsel, and I think that Justice Gantz is really an ideal person to stand at the helm and manage that defense of the rights of counsel.
You have any problem or any concerns about being these confirmed with a decade?
Not at all.
So hopefully we're around the end of the decade. Let me ask you on the issue you raised about the mistaken identity evidence in the courtroom. Like that, there's tens of thousands of people across the country that are sitting in jail cells because of mistaken identification. What action can you tell us about with regard to that and what's being done about it?
Well, first of all, I happen to know that one reason why Judge Gantz is so interested in this is that he had occasion to try a case in which it was the second trial in a murder case. The first trial, not under him, having resulted in the conviction of somebody who turned out to be entirely innocent. And that he then got to preside over the case of the real perpetrator, hopefully the real perpetrator, but after the first person had been vindicated because of, had been wrongfully convicted because of mistaken eyewitness identification. The study group that he put together, the court that under his leadership put together, was composed of prosecutors, defense lawyers, judges, academics, and marshaled the enormous amount of scholarly research that has been going on, the approaches that are taken of other states to how to deal with what procedures police ought to be following in connection with identification, what kinds of standards and procedures courts should be using in reviewing cases of identification, what kinds of jury instructions or about the court to be given to the jurors. And a number of recommendations were made and are now pending before the full court. And hopefully we will get some serious change and some serious action on recommendations that will help to prevent this terrible flaw in the system of adjudicating guilt.
Well, in that regard, I do know, and I've seen it, that the judges still sometimes refuse to allow funds for an expert for identification issues before our court. And I mean, it is sort of basic. I mean, I don't know who put this in that.
You're so right. I mean, there's so many beliefs that people have about the validity of eyewitness identification. I'm very sure that it must be him, and the certainty is then translated into really must be guilty, when in fact there's the scientific evidence says there's simply no correlation. And there are lots of things like that which need to be sorted out. The jury should hear that. I agree with you.
And has there been studies that, on the community, around studies done? That you're relying on?
I'm not actually on that committee. I appointed our representative to the committee, but I do know from their report that they did review, lots of the scholarly material, the scientific material about this.
I remember the old, UMass Amherst, we were in class, again, sat down, the door opened, and somebody ran in, and he had all kinds of things on, and he fired a blank gun, and he ran out the door, and the professor said, write down the description of your person, and about 30 people all disagreed with each other as well. All these identification issues. But just so you know, I see CPCS lawyers filing their fines. What is in the district court and superior court, and judges saying they have allegations. And that's the case, and that is really the case against the defendant. They're still denying those fines.
And sometimes denying the experts.
Denying the experts, exactly.
Definitely a problem.
So, I think that should be moving in the direction of more people over cage and coffee and ideas. Thank you very much for coming in. Testimony means an awful lot, especially about the federal system. What is it needs on that? That's a big concern for a lot of us. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I followed the career as well over the years, and a few times. Had an impressive testimony, means quite. In response to the question about Judge Yancey's background in the U.S. Attorney's Office, more than once she said, well, things were different then than they are now in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Can you tell us a little bit more what you mean by that?
Well, we have and this system is simply intensified over time, but we have a system now where we have the main thing is the guideline system in federal court, which are no longer absolutely mandatory, but they are still advisory and they play a great role. So a prosecutor is able to say to a witness, we know what the truth is, and you have to tell us the truth. They know what the truth is. And if you don't cooperate, if you don't want to cooperate and testify and tell us what we say is the truth, then here's the sentence you're going to get. And they just show them the book. And let's say you're going to do 10 years. But if you cooperate with us and testify, you'll walk out here free.
They tell them what the truth should be.
Well, yeah, one way. Well, there are a number of ways of
I've seen
telling
that.
that. There are a number of ways of telling that.
I've been there and I've seen
Yeah,
it.
well, of course. Well, the
And-
defense lawyer says, here's what he says, and they say, no, that's not true. He's lying.
And the reason I asked that question is that one of my issues with former U.S. attorneys and U.S. attorneys coming in, and I agree with you, it's been a very long time since Judge Yancey has been a U.S. attorney, that's certainly not what defines his career. And I've read quite a few of his decisions. My daughter's recently in a law school, so she printed them off and I don't do that much work.
I saw you reading them.
Yeah, I was rereading them, actually. With all due respect to Judge Gantz, I was reading them last night, I fell asleep. I'm not suggesting there's a correlation between those but, so I had to get up out of it a little bit. But, I have a problem with people coming into our courts who've never practiced in our courts. U.S. attorneys who go and do 20 years and get their federal pension, and then they come along and want another pension here. My experience with, not all of them, but some of them, is they turn, and some of his former colleagues in experience, but when it turns out, I won't name who that is, they turn into a disaster. A disaster to the bar here. Because They haven't practiced here, they don't understand the culture. They don't understand what it's like for Councilor Casey, Councilor Julo, or other lawyers here, what it's like for us and yourself, when we were practicing in the courts of Massachusetts on a daily basis. What the stresses are on our practice in terms of doing things. They seem to turn into robots in terms of it all being about moving cases, not about justice. And they tend, from my perspective, to be prosecutors from the bench. Has that been your experience?
It has been, I can't say that I can correlate it with the prosecutors who always come out that way, but I absolutely agree with you that it's a very important qualification for a judge to have been in the trenches and understand what it's like to have to, get ready for one case one day, another case for the next day, and so on and so forth. And some judges just think that they can snap their fingers and everybody's going to, do whatever they wish. And, some others are quite considerate and understand what you have to do to represent your client adequately. And that's why I did say, when I was describing what Judge Gates' reputation was, one of them was that he was considerate. Because I think he did really understand what it was like and was respectful of the lawyer's time and the lawyer's ethics.
Do you think that U.S. attorneys who haven't practiced in Massachusetts, and by the way, the government's not appointing, nominating folks on the U.S. Attorney's Office at this point because of this council, getting one after the other, we drew a line. Do you think that they're a good fit for when they haven't practiced in Massachusetts? Do you think that we should be approving those folks? Were they been U.S. attorneys their whole career? Coming out of today's group, how do you describe them years ago?
I feel reluctant to paint with a totally broad brush because I have encountered
I'm not suggesting that there's not decent people, that there are decent people.
And there are
some, I agree.
Yeah, and
but
so I think that it ought to be a case-by-case thing, but I would tell you that I would think that, let me put it this way, an important qualification, in my view, for being a judge is that you were practicing lawyer, and not one necessarily one who just had, that was the road you all paved for you.
well, I appreciate that. Appreciate the comments. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other comments? Thank you very much. I'm going to open this segment up to, now that we've finished Judge Gant's. I'm going to open it up to public forum, and Senator Barrett and Representative Jake Coffin have been waiting very patiently. So I will call on Senator Barrett. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, Councilor. I'm actually going to defer to the senior member of the Lexington delegation, Representative Coffin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Councilors. It's an honor and pleasure for the two of us to be here on behalf of our constituents, neighbor, and friend, Justice Gant.